our problems come from our ignorance. We simply aren't aware of what's going on. We have wrong view about it. But the thing to remember about the Four Noble Truths and about Buddhism's teachings in general is that they are very specifically focused on suffering. As the Buddha said, he said, I teach two things and only two things, suffering and how to end suffering, or it can be called stress and how to end stress. Dukkha is the word, and it's very difficult to translate into English. So when we're ignorant of the Four Noble Truths, it means that we're ignorant of what the causes of suffering are and how we can end suffering. So this is very important if we want to end our suffering. And of course, if you don't want to end your suffering, then that's okay. You know, nobody's forcing you to do this. I think you have to be at a point where you've exhausted all of the impermanent joys and you start seeing through them. You start seeing through how so many of the pleasures we pursue they're inconstant, they're impermanent, they do not last. And as a result, they are going to be stressful no matter how pleasurable they are. And as I've doubtless often said before, the trouble with pleasures is they end. You know, we used to have a joke that marijuana has one terrible side effect. It wears off. And the same can be said for any drug that you're like really into. So when something goes like that, we have a pleasure, it's gone, and what do we have left? We have regret. We don't have the pleasure anymore. Very often we regret what we've done to gain that pleasure. And very often we see how short-sighted we were. And this isn't bad to see this if it can help spur us on to finding a way out of the trap that we built for ourselves. So, yeah, ignorance is how it all starts. And it seems to me that addressing our ignorance, if we can just understand what's going on with our minds, this is a very important step to get away from suffering. And that's really the name of the game in Buddhism, is like, why are we making ourselves suffer? Because suffering is always an option. I speak not of pain. Pain is inevitable. We'll always have pain in this world. But the suffering, the mental anguish that we create over our pain, that's really much more under our control than we think usually. And this isn't our fault. Our society, our culture, our upbringing, everything that we know tells us that we are puppets, that we are helpless. I had to do that because he said this. I had to do that because they said this or they did this to me. I had to do this. I like what the Buddha said about that. He said, nothing anyone else says or does to you can send you to hell. And as someone else said, you can get to this point where you can just decide that you are helpless, that your decisions don't matter, so you just say to hell with it. Except hell shows up. Hell does happen. So we need to end our ignorance, look at what's really going on, and realize how much power we actually have over the situation. We don't have complete power. We can't change reality. I don't know where people got that from. It's an oversimplification and a misreading of these ideas. That if you just think something hard enough, it'll all be okay. No, that's not going to happen. If your thinking could change reality, then nobody would die and we'd all be 20 years old.
That'd be great.
So, it would, and that's a thought, isn't it? And that's a becoming, as they call it in Buddhism. That's a mental image we suddenly have. I mean, I don't know of anyone who is over the age of 40 or 50 that hasn't daydreamed at one time or another about being 20 again or 25 again. And it's a wonderful little world, but it is very impermanent, because then the arthritis hits you again, and then you notice the varicose veins, and then you notice how difficult it is to get up out of a chair. I'm describing my own experiences. We all have our own, and this brings you right back. And then, of course, you get upset because you crave being 20 again. You cling to the idea of it. Well, it's like clinging to the idea of owning the moon. or eating a 17th piece of chocolate cake, even though you will literally explode like Mr. Creosote in the Monty Python movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's actually an interesting example of samsaric thinking, where Mr. Creosote we've all seen the movie Monty Python, The Meaning of Life, the guy that just eats so much that he finally explodes. And this is a great example of being focused on an idea, an image in your head. You've taken on an identity of the guy that wants to satisfy his hunger and will always satisfy his hunger, and he'll always be able to eat because he loves eating, and this is a pleasure that will never end, right? He's trying to make something that is intrinsically impermanent a perpetual part of his life. And we all know people that do this, one object of pursuit or another, one object of desire or another. But in fact, when it comes into the real world, boom, it's an explosion. So, yeah, the Four Noble Truths give us knowledge of what's actually happening in our minds. And what's happening is we crave and we cling to what we crave to. And the clinging itself is a suffering. The clinging itself is suffering because it's going to be clinging to something that's not permanent. So what's the solution? Well, we want to find something permanent, don't we? Well, what is permanent? Well, let's look around at the things that aren't permanent. You know, your body is not permanent, right? Your emotions, your desires are not permanent. The world around you is not permanent. So we look within. And one of the things we do is try to bring ourselves into contact with as much reality as we can. Well, what's real? What's real is this present moment that we are experiencing. This very moment, right this second, right this very moment. And in a certain sense, there really is nothing else. So what does this present moment give us? It gives us the ability to think outside of the box. It gives us the ability to think outside of all of the stories we tell ourselves. Because most of the time we're living in a narrative. You know, we tell stories about ourselves. The psychologist Julian Jaynes, you know, he was going to come up eventually, had a wonderful definition of the ego, the I. And he said it is basically an imaginary self about which you tell a story. And if you're living in that story, you're never really going to have any power over yourself, your life. None of your decisions are going to be very good. But if we can be in the present moment, that gives us a seat of power. When we're right here, we can look back at the past and we can look at our projections, our hopes for the future, without falling into them and living in them. Because, you know, you start living in the past and then you start comparing it to what you don't have now or what you do have now. You know, I don't have that anymore. And, but now I've got arthritis and I never had that before, but I don't have, you know, that young body I used to have. And this is not helpful. I mean, it's good to be aware of these things, obviously, but not to the point where you make such emotional investment in them that you start crying because, you know, you're clinging to these things that simply do not exist. You're clinging to unreality. And you're very real. You're very real. So what can we do? Well, I mean, when we look at this moment, according to Buddhism, the present moment is really composed of three things, right? This has to do with karma. Karma is a psychological state. Karma is intention. It's also action, but it includes mental action. And your mental actions are your intentions. You have to intend something before you do something. Even if you think you're doing something automatically, there are things going on in your mind that are going to determine what your reaction is going to be. So all of your actions are the results of your intentions. Another way to put it is all of your actions are the result of your karma. All of your situation is the result of your intentions, your karma. So the present moment is in part the result of your past intentions, right? The present is composed of what we've done in the past. It also has to do with your present intentions, right? You have intentions right now. And the other part of the present moment of the three parts is the results of your present intentions. So you've got the results of your past intentions. You can't change that at all. You've got the results of your present intentions, but because these are present intentions, those you can change. So this tells us that in the moment of now, you have the power to choose your intentions, to choose what the results of your intentions are going to be. And the more skillful, the more virtuous our intentions, the more skillful, virtuous, our life will be, our situation will be. Now, and this was pointed out to me recently, unless you've got all three of those parts, you do not have the present. Now, we have no control over what we have intended in the past. The past is solid. It's like the blockchain. You know, everything from the past is kind of written into you, right? Your karma. But we have control over our present intention. So if we can become intentionless, then we will produce no new results. The present moment will fall apart and we go beyond space and time. Now, obviously, we're not going to physically go beyond space and time. But this allows our minds to no longer be chained down by these causalities. Now, how do you be intentionless? That's the difficulty. That's the key. And you know, when I say you have to not have intentions, that's the same thing as when you read about Buddhism where they say the goal is not to make any more karma. Well, Roger, I think I'm getting a signal from Shambhala International Airport, so I think we're going to be starting our approach pattern. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to turn off smoking lamps. Stewards will be by to collect rolling papers, hash pipes, or anything else you might have. The seatbelt light is now lit. This is where sound effects could do a little. And please return your seat to an upright position. We're making our approach to Shambhala International Airport at an undisclosed location in either the Himalayan or Himalayan mountains. The weather there is, as always, perfect because it's a large underground city leading to the secret caverns of the inner hidden hollow earth. But that's another story for another show. I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to listen, and thank especially people that are still there after hearing the beginning of this and they're still with us. But before we go, we should be sharing our socials. Roger, why don't you start with that and tell people how they can contact you, the great Roger Hansen.
If you want to contact me, you can find my community on Teams. It's Roger's Hangout. You can also find Roger's Hangout on Element Matrix. Besides those, I do have the wonderful World of Weirdness, which is on Discord. You can find me there as well. Now, when it comes to platforms, the only two that I go to is X, Roger Hansen, at ROGLOL1973, and mine's at Roger_Hansen.
And of course, you can take a look at some of my thoughts and ideas at my website, navakavada.org. That's Navakavada. It's spelled just like it sounds. We also have Navakavada on YouTube, and there's also a BitChute channel. You can find me on minds.com, Otto X. And also, you might just run into me down at the corner. You never know. Oh, we're beginning our final descent. I see the doors are opening on the side of the mountain. And yeah, so I'm going to sign off now. Thanks, everyone, for being part of our show. Looking forward to having you back next week on Tuesday. And until then, peace all. Peace.